When my tranquil garden became the playground for an entitled storm named Karen, I discovered that defending my flowers also meant reclaiming my voice. Who knew revenge could taste so sweet? As my inner storm of confusion raged on, I watched in horror as Karen continued her rampage through my carefully curated garden, each booted stomp triggering a visceral blend of disbelief and burgeoning rage. "Tulips are overrated anyway," she quipped, without even turning around. My mouth attempted to form a protest, but instead, all that emerged was a series of spluttered half-words, accompanied by the weak flailing of my arms like a frightened chicken. It was as if Karen was auditioning for an avant-garde theatrical performance, where the theme was sheer chaos, and my garden was the unfamiliar stage. At that moment, I couldn't even summon the energy to shout, "You're ruining my garden." Watching someone desecrate your sanctuary is akin to witnessing a toddler pour orange juice into a computer monitor, complete and total horror. Just then, my spunky next-door neighbor Lucy, apparently drawn to the commotion like a moth to a flame, popped her head over the fence, wearing a flowy sundress that practically screamed fun. "Evan, did you request a guided tour of destruction?" she called out, her voice echoing with a sweet mix of incredulity and laughter. I appreciated her support, but in the midst of watching my tulips get trampled, I wasn't quite sure if now was an appropriate time for comedy. Lucy, however, seemed to take my befuddled stoicism as a cue to dive into the fray. "Hey, Karen, those tulips have feelings, you know. They didn't ask for the abuse." Her playful taunt bounced off the walls of my garden, providing a slight edge of empowerment amidst my churning emotions. In that moment, I imagined my garden as the battleground for an epic conflict between luxury-clad tyranny and humble horticulture. But Karen didn't even flinch. Her smirk only deepened as she turned to face Lucy. "Oh, please, Lucy. The only thing those flowers are doing is causing my allergies to act up. They're practically begging for the sweet embrace of my foot." As she swung her leg back to stomp another tulip, my heart stopped. This wasn't just a garden dispute. It was an overt war on botanical beauty. Adrenaline surged through my veins, pushing me to yell something spectacularly clever, a witty retort that would send her scuttling back to her overpriced boutique. Yet all that escaped me was a light, "Those flowers don't smell that bad." I cringed at my own inability to put forth a proper defense. Am I really this pathetic, flailing against a supervillain of law and order? Karen, still blissfully ignorant of the chaos she was producing, continued her tirade. "And what is this ridiculous thorny barrier doing around your garden, Evan? Are you trying to keep out potential friends?" One could almost hear the cackle lurking under her pretentious tone. "You should really be more inviting. You know what they say, bloom where you're planted." It was ironic that she thought herself a gardener of social norms when she could barely manage to tend to her personal relationships. Hearing this only prompted a roaring laugh from Lucy, cutting through the tension, nudging at me to see my own absurdity in this clash. "Karen, my friend has a garden. You have a swamp of entitlement." My resolve solidifying like cement, I clarified through my laughter-induced wheezing. "Those thorns are there for a reason, Karen. Might I suggest you take a lesson in respecting boundaries instead of bulldozing through them?" At this point, I could see a flicker of confusion flash over her heavily made-up face, a blend of disbelief and irritation. Perhaps for the first time, she considered that I was not just a passive spectator in my own backyard, but a proud gardener willing to defend his turf. That moment felt electric, vibrant, almost cinematic. My garden became a vast arena, and I stood at the center, spatula in one hand and fierce determination in the other. With one last dramatic flourish of my arm, I turned my back to Karen, and as she unleashed a torrent of complaints about my wild imagination, I raised my voice above her venomous remarks. I declared, "I think it's time for you to take a break from horticultural heroics and consider a career transition into landscaping." Lucy burst into uncontrollable laughter, which only fueled my fire. I could feel the tension tightly woven into that moment, unravel into an unforeseen camaraderie with my neighbor and a sharp realization. I was not merely defending my garden. I was defending my dignity. As the hum of her car's engine rang out in the distance, I fixed my gaze on the disaster before me, not the destructive remnants of my tulips, but a new flourishing spirit that rose in me, itching for revenge. As I daydreamed about what mischief I could conjure next, thorny booby traps or perhaps an elaborate sign labeling Karen's disdain for my garden, I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Who knew that the seemingly innocent act of gardening would turn into a comedy of errors starring moi against the queen of entitlement? And now that I possessed this confidence, having Lucy cheer from the sidelines, thoughts of a thorny plan danced in my head. How to exact minimal revenge while achieving maximum hilarity. I could already feel the creative juices bubbling as I mentally mapped out my immediate gardening goals, eager to counter Karen's shenanigans in the most entertaining way possible. What would my masterpiece of sweet revenge be? Would it truly be just brambles standing guard? Or perhaps something more theatrical and absurd? As I surveyed the wreckage of my once vibrant garden, I couldn't help but audibly groan, not just at my trampled tulips, but at the absurdity of Karen's entitled rampage. There they lay, the poor flowers that had once swayed gently in the breeze, now lying flat, as if unceremoniously knocked down by a drunk sumo wrestler during a silent meditation retreat. My inner warrior stirred, and I jotted down detailed notes of botanical vengeance in my head. Maybe I could turn Karen's disdain for my thorny barrier into a trap more befitting her utter disregard. After all, could anything be more poetic than a diva caught in a prickly web of her own making? I chuckled to myself, this contemplative brainstorming moment truly floating me above the chaos of carnage. But this couldn't just be any run-of-the-mill garden prank. No, I needed something spectacular and clever, a euphoric blend of merriment and mischief. Then it hit me, how about a beautiful garden gnome staking a claim in my garden? Yes, a flamboyant gnome bedecked in ridiculous colors, complete with a cheeky grin. I could even put a tiny sign in its hand that read, "Keep off the grass, Karen." The image alone sent waves of laughter through me. I could already picture her face, exasperated and torn between her lavish fashion and a sudden panic about the loss of property value because of a rogue gnome. Perhaps I'd even hide some fake thorny beware signs around to ramp up the absurdity of the scenario. Fueled by the hilarity brewing in my mind and empowered by my newfound determination, I raced back inside the house, much like a frantic inventor in a slapstick comedy. Lucy, of course, could sense the rising tide of chaos, and met me at the door, a knowing sparkle in her eyes. "You're not actually planning revenge, are you?" she asked, barely able to contain her laughter. "Spot on, my dear friend," I exclaimed, twirling my finger dramatically in the air as though conducting a symphony. "I'm crafting an operation that will make Shakespeare and Picasso weep with envy. Picture this: gnomes, thorns, and perfectly manufactured chaos." I felt unstoppable as I revealed my plans to the audience of one, who promptly burst into a fit of giggles at my melodramatic delivery. The next step needed to be executed flawlessly. While the idea of frantically scavenging for garden gnomes was already planted firmly in my mind, I sensed I needed the perfect additional prop to really drive home the point that this was a revenge plot inspired by art and woven with humor. What could that be? Embroidered cushions that scream "happy gardening"? The thought echoed like a shot of adrenaline coursing through me, equally ridiculous and strangely delightful. After pooling ideas with Lucy, we decided we would host an impromptu gardening ice cream social, where we would unveil the magnificent gnome, turning my garden into a vibrant festival complete with delicious treats and colorful balloons. Because nothing says, "Stay out of my space," quite like serving homemade ice cream while playfully taunting Karen with cheerful decor. As I enlisted Lucy's help to gather supplies, my heart fuller and the mood high, we bounced ideas back and forth like children setting off on an imaginative school project. Why not hand out prickly vibes-only flyers to the neighbors and invite them for delicious Sundays in the garden of superfluous gnomes? I suggested in a mock-serious tone, and Lucy raised a perfectly manicured eyebrow, barely containing her amusement as she added, "We should invite Karen too. It's only fair since she loves gardening so much." Or is that just her never-ending complaint contest? Laughter erupted like a tractor, pulling a confetti cannon. The more we planned, the more I relished the delightful absurdity of the revenge plot unfolding. Finally, when the day arrived, I stood at the threshold of what had transformed into a festive gathering. Bright balloons swaying, dreamy ice cream cones spinning effortlessly on colorful tables, And the gnome, my gleeful secret weapon, standing proudly, with a whimsical hat tilted askew and a cheeky expression. It awaited its moment in the spotlight. Just as guests started mingling, I spotted Karen strutting down the sidewalk like she owned the place, her eyes flickering with confusion once she took in the unexpected carnival taking place in my once desolate garden. My heart pounded in anticipation. She approached with that ever-familiar scowl, only this time it was mixed with a notable sense of recognition creeping onto her features. In that moment, I knew it was showtime. The petals had finally bloomed in my favor. The anticipation crackled in the air around us as I contemplated how Karen would react to the subjects of her disdain-mingling kid, like in the face of her entitled ferocity. Was this garden party about to blossom into a scene ripe for hilarity? With the air thick with anticipation, I could feel the chaos brewing just beneath the surface of my homemade ice cream social. As Karen strode closer, a blend of arrogance and curiosity radiated off her like the fragrance of freshly cut grass, certainly a notification of looming disappointment, considering the nature of her invasion. She adjusted her designer sunglasses and puffed out her chest, eyeing the garden party like a hawk preparing to dive onto an unsuspecting field mouse. I grinned as I glimpsed the bemused expressions on the faces of my neighbors. They were just as much spectators of this theatrical showdown as I was. Oh, how I loved the sweet smell of poetic justice lingering in the air. As Karen neared the edge of the festivities, her eyes landed on the gnome, its goofy face mirroring my own excitement. "You've got to be kidding me," she scoffed, lightly tossing her hair back as if to deflect the sheer idiocy of my creative revolt. "Is this truly what you've reduced your life to? A pathetic garden gnome? How juvenile." I was taken aback momentarily. Was my aesthetics being challenged by a woman who viewed her garden as a runway? The blossoming outrage was about to unfurl in glorious technicolor. I leaned against a balloon-adorned table, chuckling lightly. "Karen, my dear, it's not just any gnome. This beauty is a symbol of my very highbrow sense of humor." I waved my hands around theatrically for good measure. With the ease of anyone who has practiced the timing of a punchline, I gestured toward the intricately designed signage I had placed beneath the gnome. "Look closely. It hints at your esteemed presence in my garden. Keep off the grass, Karen. Isn't it just something?" Lucy nearly snorted her ice cream, a tribute to the sheer delight in her eyes, as she watched the interaction unfold. Karen's scowl merely deepened as she read the sign, which prompted me to bask in the comedic glow of her indignation. "Oh, darling, keep off the grass? You know how I feel about being told where I can tread," she retorted, hands on her hips. "Ah, you're right," I quipped, pointing dramatically at her. "But those magnificent shoes of yours were made for walking, just not through the gorgeous realm I've created here." The neighbors giggled, and I could feel my confidence swell, buoyed by the laughter that erupted like fireworks. It was as if we were all eagerly awaiting Karen's next move, like children on a playground, seeking the prime spot to watch the aforementioned hawk futilely swoop over the heads of oblivious younglings. She turned on her heel as if to storm off, but not before lurking menacingly onto the sidewalk that bordered my garden, hands still furiously on her hips. The garden ambiance was intoxicating, and just when I thought Karen was resigning herself to defeat, she turned back with a pointed finger, like a villain in a soap opera caught in her own nefarious plan. "Stay out of my way, Evan. You think this is funny? Just wait until the neighborhood sees how absurd you are." I couldn't help but laugh at her indignation. The woman just didn't grasp that her entitled antics had only magnified her ridiculousness. "Trust me, Karen, the neighborhood is already loving this as their personal reality show," I replied with a flourish, gesturing towards an entourage of amused onlookers. In that moment, I decided to talk up the party in pure comedic fashion, leaning into the absurdity of our little drama. I raised my ice cream-filled cup and shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, you know what the world needs more of? Garden gnomes and delicious homemade ice cream. Who's with me?" Cheers erupted, and suddenly it felt as though my small village had transformed into a carnival of camaraderie, laughter echoing as the tension with Karen was virtually vacated. She stood there, agog, arms crossed, evidently considering her next move, looking utterly misplaced amongst the jubilant chaos of joyous neighbors licking their ice cream and baby giggles wafting through the air. It was one of those moments, A perfect blend of sweet victory mixed with sheer silliness. "Karen," I called, grinning like a Cheshire cat as I leaned slightly forward just enough to evoke a comical innocence. "Oh, won't you join us for some ice cream?" Guaranteed 0 calories if served under the watchful eye of gnomes. Laughter rippling around me should have been my cue to exhale. But instead, I found myself on the precipice of a new idea, expanding this raucous ice cream parlor. What if I introduced an entire series of gnome-themed snacks? Perhaps gnome cones featuring crushed sprinkles, embodying those ethereal garden vibes. "Let's transform my patch of sanctuary into a gnome paradise," I mused, excitement bubbling like the soda spouting out of an overshaken bottle. Could the gnome trap lead us into a hilarious business venture? As I gazed upon my garden, transformed into an arena of joyous chaos and cutting humor, I couldn't help but wonder if Karen's next step would be as entertaining as the last. What further absurdity awaited me, with her still lingering sour specter lurking on the periphery? The laughter echoed like a satisfied symphony, and for a blissful moment, I forgot all about my sweet nemesis Karen. But as the giggles faded into the background, I felt her glaring presence, like a storm cloud threatening to rain on my joyous parade. Her arms still crossed defiantly, her spiky blonde hair glinting dangerously in the sun. She was an indignant warrior determined to reclaim her battlefield, a hallowed space of entitlement. I had unknowingly transformed my little garden gathering into a grand stage, and Karen was poised for an encore, revealing the lengths this woman would go just to exert her will. As I took another scoop of my double chocolate chip ice cream, I could see her considering how she might shift the spotlight back onto herself. Suddenly, her lips curled into a sly smile, one that had me instantly suspicious. I wasn't stepping into this next phase without some cautious calculation. "All right, audience," Karen boomed, her voice a raucous trumpet, commanding the attention of what felt like the entire neighborhood. "I've had enough of this childish behavior." My stomach plummeted as I skimmed the visitors gathered around my cheese platter decorated with daisies, their laughter slipping into nervous giggles. She had the ability to turn a whimsical afternoon into a tornado of tension and prior engagements. "It's time for you all to see that kindness doesn't mean I will shrink into a garden shadow." A cringe-worthy silence followed as she strode into my garden, her shoes crushing my carefully cultivated tulips. As I watched her prance across my floral layout as if it were some designer runway, a burst of inspiration hit me. A counterattack right from the top shelf of the humor cabinet. "Are you auditioning for a role in How to Ruin Someone's Garden?" I shouted, punctuating my statement with a flair that had the once nervous crowd roaring with laughter. Even Lucy clutched her sides, her eyes dancing as she snorted yet again, watching Karen spin around, her expression flickering between disbelief. This was my neighborhood, my garden, the turf I fought for through sticky summer days. Have you ever seen Petals do the cha-cha? It was absurd, but in that moment, it was exactly what was needed to keep Karen at bay, an unexpected reminder that she was merely a character in my comedic play, and I held the script now. With each step Karen took, I leaned into my own audacity. "If you're going to dance, Karen, make sure you watch your footing," I hollered just as her heel got caught on a rogue daisies that had stubbornly defied her best efforts of destruction. She stumbled, gasping in horror, as she almost toppled into my newly assembled garden bench, a bench I had lovingly crafted from reclaimed wood, boasting a rustic charm that could charm even the thorns off a rose. The world around me erupted in laughter again, a sweet sound that combined with the fragrant breeze, an intoxicating experience that made me feel invincible, like a hero in a whimsical fairy tale. "Maybe this is nature's way of showing you who really runs the show here," I couldn't resist adding, relishing every glorious moment. Karen recovered, narrowing her eyes dangerously, but perhaps realizing how ridiculous she looked, her attitude morphed from feral to feigned calm. "You think this is funny? You have no idea who you're messing with," she exclaimed, her defiance wrapped in designer anger. I stood there, rainbow sprinkles scattered on my shirt, boldly facing the gust of her arrogance. "Oh, Karen," I grinned, enjoying every second of our verbal sparring. "You should know I'm not as easy to scare as a daisy caught in a whirlwind. It's like trying to intimidate a gnome. It's just not going to work." My neighbors began chanting, "Gnome Defense League," and I rushed to join in, paddling harder against the waves of Karen's indignation. I could feel the tide of our little community rising against those who thought they could stamp out the joy with a frown. In a final attempt to reclaim authority, Karen pointed towards the party decorations. "Don't you know how to have a proper gathering? It's all about elegance and sophistication." How could she of all people, speak of elegance? I struggled to keep a straight face as I envisioned that gaudy party she had thrown last month, where she had dared serve ranch-flavored ice cream. "Maybe you should try a sprinkle of whimsy then, dear Karen." I shot back, trying to keep my tone light and taunting in feverish delight. The duel of humorous wit was almost exhausting, but the excitement in the air was contagious, energizing my resolve. Just as Karen opened her mouth to retaliate, her expression shifted. She realized the pulse of laughter around her wasn't dissipating, but instead growing louder with each passing minute. I could see the cogs turning in her mind, and the realization that she would have to compete with humor, community bonding, and garden gnomes was definitely weighing heavily on that spiky-haired facade. "Do you think this is over?" she shot back, finally taking a step back toward her car. But my garden was alive, lush with the sheer thrill of the circus we had created together. "It's just beginning," I confidently asserted, visions of expanding my gnome-themed venture swimming through my mind. Perhaps my garden party wouldn't just merely be an enjoyable gathering, but a catalyst for an even bigger wave of laughter. But what would inevitably unfold next? As Karen staggered back towards her gleaming car, a hunk of metal that appeared to scream entitlement, she threw one last furious glare at my garden. It was as if she was trying to scorch my lovingly cared-for plants with her smoldering scowl. But the damage was done. She had revealed herself as the comedic villain of this neighborhood saga. The crowd chanted, "Gnome Defense League," louder than before, and the unity was electric. Meanwhile, I basked in my victory, full of wonder at the delight bubbling around me. If laughter was the nectar of the gods, my garden had become a veritable Mount Olympus. Could it be? Was I finally on my way to becoming the grand protector of whimsy and garden puns? Just as I conjured daydreams of becoming some sort of fun-loving garden superhero, caped, if you will, in sunflowers and twinkling fairy lights, the crowd erupted into a new series of giggles. Lucy waded through the laughter toward me, her sundress swirling like a burst of color. "Evan, the Gnome Defense League needs a banner," she declared, her eyes sparkling with mischief. The mere thought sent me into a fit of giggles. I could envision a rallying cry scrawled below an illustration of a gnome brandishing a miniature watering can like an epic sword. "I'm in," I exclaimed, ready to take this whimsical liberation to the next level. This garden wasn't just about blossoms anymore. It had morphed into a beacon of shared joy, where community and humor intertwined like vines seeking the sun. However, as I turned back to the drama unfolding at Karen's expense, an epiphany struck me harder than a rogue daisy seeking vengeance. The woman, who seemed entirely unaware of how ludicrously she was behaving, was now rummaging through her car, searching with a dogged determination for something that could bolster her perceived authority. Had she started pulling out Karen emergency supplies? Perhaps a roll of complaint forms, or a hidden stash of lattes for her grand return. I leaned closer, eager for the reveal. Silly me for thinking the drama was over. Turns out, we were far from done. What kind of twist awaited just beyond the fragrant blooms of my garden? Suddenly, she emerged from her car, holding what appeared to be a notebook and a bright pink megaphone, as if channeling her inner authority on a whole new level. The absurdity made my stomach twist in laughter. Was she seriously about to conduct a rant on garden etiquette through that flashy contraption? "Listen up," she bellowed through the superior volume of her megaphone. The neighbors fell silent. The hand-holding symposium came to a halt, like a group of onlookers before a gladiatorial match. Part of me wanted to retreat into a flower pot and hide, but the more courageous side urged me to bow to the whimsy unfolding before me. "This show is priceless," I thought as I braced for whatever mad declarations would come next. With her trademark sass, she launched into a tirade about neighborhood norms and how flower beds should reflect sophistication, a term she wielded like a magic wand. "Violets and tulips only belong in gardens of taste," she declared, firing her glances at my lovingly scattered wildflowers, as if they were the culprit in a crime scene. The incredulous laughter resumed, ballooning as she continued to berate a bouquet of tiger lilies that had dared to stand boldly in my garden. "Oh, heavens, not the tiger lilies," I teased, cupping my heart in faux shock. How was it that someone could be so fabulous, yet simultaneously clueless? The judgment, wrapped inside her words, was an adamant reminder that we'd have to reinforce our defenses if we were to shelter our beautiful garden from her misplaced opinions. The air crackled with humor as Lucy elbowed me, whispering, "We should give her a gardening lesson on the beauty of chaos." Her contagious giggles sparked laughter that bounced between us, reflecting the essence of camaraderie that was now very clear. "This is our garden, Karen. You're just a character in our play." Drawing strength from that realization was magical. I raised my hands, channeling my best director's voice. "Now, watch closely, everyone. Step right up and learn from the master gardener." With Lucy at my side, I began pointing out the intricacies of my garden. "Here, we have spontaneity. Look at that marigold right next to the zucchini plant. It's a friendship of vibrant color, a true testament that beauty blooms in unexpected pairings." As the crowd erupted into laughter at my exaggerated descriptions, I saw Karen's face contort in confusion. It was clear she had no idea we were not just standing up for flowers, but embracing the chaos and joy she loathed. This was almost cathartic. There we all were, banded together against the drama of the entitled. It turned into a ridiculous performance, one I'd gladly improvise. Perhaps the greatest irony was when she finally stomped her foot, the sharpness of her high heel eerily echoing in the mirthful twilight of our giggles. "You think this is just fun and games?" she screeched, but the battle had pivoted. No longer was I intimidated. If anything, I felt buoyant, as if I had sprouted gossamer wings. In that very moment, Karen became unmoored from her authority, and I felt my heart swell with tenacity. "Oh, Karen," I declared, "this is just a plant comedy show, and you forgot to read the script. Let's teach you about planting seeds of kindness." Cheers erupted around me, more jubilant than any garden variety celebration I'd seen. I wondered if we were planting the seeds of hilarity indeed, ready to watch them flourish. But what whimsical next installment would this saga bring? Would, dare I say, Karen learn to embrace our frolicsome neighborhood? Or was it merely a matter of time before she'd parse out more mischief in this flowery tale of ours? In the raucous atmosphere of our neighborhood drama, I found Karen's expression morphing from outrage to bewilderment. Every time I pointed out the wonders of my unruly garden, a riot of colors, scents, and yes, glorious chaos, her frown deepened, as if trying to calculate how the universe could produce such disarray with any semblance of charm. I paused dramatically, allowing the laughter reverberating around me to rise to a cacophonous peak. "Ladies and gentlemen," I called out, channeling my inner game show host, "welcome to Garden vs. Karen, the showdown of the century." The applause and guffaws echoed through the air like melodious winter chimes, creeping into Karen's stony fortress and likely cracking a few of her stubborn defenses along the way. My confidence surged. The day had morphed into a luminous celebration of community and humor, and I wasn't about to let Karen's antics dismantle the camaraderie we had so joyously built. "Let me tell you about my hydrangeas," I declared, extending my arm towards a cluster of blooms that sparkled blue in the afternoon sun. "They thrive in the wildest of environments, just like the laughter shared amongst friends. They teach us how to embrace the chaos, even if it means sprouting in places that would make a traditional gardener gasp." At that moment, Lucy strummed an impromptu tune on her invisible ukulele, making exaggerated strumming motions through the air. The crowd felt like a riotous concert as chuckles erupted, weaving the atmosphere tightly together like the strands of my carefully disguised, charming chaos garden theme. But lo and behold, just when I thought the spotlight could not shine any brighter on our giggling ensemble, Karen regained her footing, or as close to solid grounds as she could manage. With her megaphone raised, she seemed to morph into a grand figure of perceived authority, despite the flicker of disbelief in her eyes. "You think this is all fun?" she croaked, adjusting her spiky blonde mane with an air of feigned indignation. "I'm merely trying to elevate the standards of this neighborhood. It would benefit from a little refinement. Flowers should act as a reflection of our community." My heart skipped a beat at the sheer audacity. Who knew Karen had taken on the role of an eccentric horticultural critic? In a sly twist of fate, the crowd's laughter rippled again at her contradictory declaration. "Refinement?" I echoed, almost gasping for breath, as I clasped my hands on my knees. "You've chosen to pick on blossoms bursting with personality. A weed might as well be a bouquet here." My words threw gasoline on the fire of hilarity, igniting a spark that turned into an inferno of banter. "Tell us, Karen, when was the last time you strolled through the garden of spontaneity?" Oh wait, I recall, it never happened. The raucous laughter swarmed around me like bright-hued butterflies. I couldn't help but feel like a crafty wizard, revealing a spell that mesmerized even the most resistant of audiences. As every punchline landed, Karen's frustration continued to tighten within her expression, like a flower bud threatening to burst from too much internal pressure. Despite her attempts at composure, you could tell she was beginning to see how absurd this spectacle had turned. With my newfound comedic energy fueling our neighborhood rebels, I launched into an even grander concession. "Let's create a play of garden appreciation. We'll showcase the absurdity of the exactitude you cling to, Karen. Picture it. Gnomes and wildflowers leading the charge of beauty. No confined boundaries, just pure delight." The idea took flight, soaring higher than my most ambitious sunflower. The neighbors responded with cheers, and I felt delighted at the thought that our little corner of the world was about to embrace all manner of unusual tastes. But as Karen's eyes flicked around the crowd and caught the growing anarchistic zeal, a strange shift shimmered in the air. Rather than continuing with her tirade, she took a step back, the megaphone dropping slightly in her hand. Was it possible she was considering the sanctuary of whimsy instead of persisting in her dramatic crusade? The atmosphere was electric, a palpable tension rooted in a bizarre cocktail of tension and laughter, deep fears and unanticipated camaraderie. It struck me then, with more clarity than my morning coffee had ever provided. Maybe this absurd confrontation was precisely what our neighborhood needed, a wake-up call to savor the blooming unpredictability of life. Suddenly, I had a wild idea. I put my hands on my hips, adopting an exaggeratedly serious pose. Hear ya, neighborhood residents. It's now imperative that we appoint the role of garden ambassador. I boomed, causing a ripple of laughter to flow through the ranks again. And I believe, based on her extensive experience in uprooting all things delightful, our friend Karen will excel at it. What say you, Karen? My mock seriousness echoed amid the chorus of chuckles while Lucy gripped her sides, tears of laughter spilling down her cheeks. For a second, in her confusion, her scowl softened. Had we made a garden convert out of her after all? Karen stood there in silence, and for the first time since her grand entrance, I could swear I detected a twinkle of uncertainty in those stony blue eyes. Perhaps convinced this wasn't a battle she expected to partake in, the tide had turned dramatically, and in that moment, it took all of my will not to double over in fits of laughter. "What say you?" I chimed, optimistic that maybe this melodrama could wind down into peaceful triumph. Yet, as I glanced deeper into her eyes, a mischievous grin began to nibble at the corners of her mouth. Was it possible she'd grasped the unexpected joy found in the chaos? Or would this tale of thorns lace itself into more mischief in the future? As I gazed at Karen, awaiting her response, the gathered crowd seemed to hold their breath, tension thick enough to slice through with a garden trowel. I could feel the incredulous eyes of my neighbors trained on her, a collective anticipation humming in the air. Was the crown of garden ambassador really a bridge too far for her? My heart raced at the possibility that the cartoonishly dramatic transformation of this encounter could culminate in an unexpected alliance. "How about a no-take-backsies rule on the title, Karen?" I added cheekily, grinding my teeth to suppress the giggles that threatened to spew from me like an overenthusiastic sprinkler. This was theater at its finest. Amidst cheerful murmurs that radiated like sunshine over a patch of daisies, I noticed the twitch of Karen's lips, a small, tentative flicker that felt monumental against her usual gruff exterior. Could it be her resolve was cracking? With the eagerness of a last-minute act on Broadway, the crowd began chanting, "Karen! Karen! Karen!" in rhythmic unison, a ridiculous serenade of democracy breaking out beneath the afternoon sun. I watched, wide-eyed and bemused, as the mood transformed from antagonism to sheer absurdity. How did we go from a botanical battle to a title bestowment worthy of a reality show? If anyone had asked me a couple of hours before, I would have laughed until I cried at the thought. Yet here we were, tiptoeing on a flaming tightrope of hilarity. A resolute, yet hesitant expression crossed her face, the tight lines around her eyes softening ever so slightly. "Garden ambassador, huh?" she grumbled, though I detected a hint of amusement dancing in her voice. It felt like the cosmos was winking at me through her sassy hesitation. "Well, fine. I suppose I could find the time to help cultivate a bit of organization around here." The unexpected admission drew a gasp from the audience, as if I had pulled a rabbit from a top hat. Had she just agreed to take on her own version of community gardening? A slight gasp of disbelief mixed with the raucous laughter turning into joyous applause squelched into the sunlight. Did this mean I'd successfully tamed the tempest that was my neighborhood Karen? "Let's give Karen some love," I shouted, thrusting my fists in the air like a victorious gladiator. "We can help her present her ideas without uprooting the delightful chaos we've grown to adore." My impromptu declaration sent waves of camaraderie sweeping through our little gathering as cheers erupted. It was as if the universe had pulled the rug from under us, flipping the script completely. The collective chuckle warmed my heart as neighbors rallied together, ready to support this new version of Karen. A small part of me entertained the intoxicating wild notion that I had birthed a garden revolutionary, a reformer molded from the very thorns meant to prick us. In the chaos of laughter, Lucy slipped an arm through mine and beamed, "Evan, look how you've not only survived this encounter, but navigated it like a true hero. Who knew you'd stir a plot twist so delicious?" I couldn't help but smile back at her exuberance and the unexpected warmth radiating from my neighbors. Watching Karen's initial resistance melt away was like witnessing the first sunrise in winter. The drama that once felt insurmountable now seemed petty in the face of collective joy and whirligig ideas planted in our midst. Who would have thought that all it took to transform an honest-to-garden feud was some humor, a little creativity, and a sprinkle of goodwill? As applause enveloped us and the atmosphere relaxed into celebratory banter, I saw Karen's posture shift slightly, her shoulders lowering, and the sneer on her face now transformed into an uncertain smile. "I bite small." Clearly, this association with humor had turned her once stern disposition into something resembling a child caught up in a surprise party. I seized the moment, realizing it was worth pushing the envelope just a bit further. "So, Karen," I beamed, "how about we schedule the grand unveiling of your first community project? Let's celebrate the disarray, and perhaps a gnome-choosing ceremony among wildflowers." I capped my suggestion with a dramatic flourish that had everyone rolling with laughter. To my surprise, Karen broke into a chuckle that sounded genuine, among the most uncharacteristic sounds to escape her lips. "Okay, but if I'm pulling the gnome string around here, there will be absolutely no weed or florist debates," she declared, the playful defiance woven into her newfound voice. The crowd erupted, and just like that, we transformed from sworn enemies into collaborators, all in one absurdly enjoyable afternoon. One could hardly script a scene so bizarre yet fulfilling, a heartwarming dance of irony sharply revealing that even the most cantankerous of characters could don a new persona. Would we become a neighborhood that coalesced around the love of improvisational gardening? Who could have predicted this delightful turn of fate? With my initial battle over and laughter lingering like scents from my garden, I sighed contently. It was, in truth, a victory worth celebrating. The pitch was set for new adventures in this romp of community chaos, and I felt exuberantly ready to embrace every glorious petal. There were gardens to nurture, hearts to open, and who knew how many unexpected friendships could blossom. After all, if we could weather a match with a neighborhood Karen, surely we could handle anything the horticultural world threw our way.